Hi, Devin. Welcome to Industry Insights with G2. So this segment right here is for our marketing, basically marketing and tech audience. So we bring industry leaders like you to our platform, and we'll ask you some simple questions related to some of the trending topics that our audience will benefit from. And jumping straight to my first question. Today, we are going to talk a lot about B2B marketing, virality, and content creation. My first question is around viral content. There's this obsession in B2B marketing, especially today, with viral content and massive reach. So what do you think is fundamentally wrong with this approach? And what is like that companies need to maybe work upon?
Yeah, what I think is fundamentally broken with that approach is you're going for popularity instead of resonance with the people that are actually going to buy or make influencing decisions or influence, purchasing decisions on your product. So a lot of times people say, hey, I want to go viral. I want as many people as possible, right, to see the content. And that fundamentally is a flaw because great marketing and effective marketing isn't about getting as many people as possible to see your message and to drive awareness, but it's for as many people as possible in your market, right? So if you think of the world, if you're posting on LinkedIn, for example, there's hundreds of millions of users. So if you're saying, hey, I want as many people as possible to see that, you're actually forgetting the main part, which is you want to get people who make and influence buying decisions to see your message. And the reason I think that happens a lot is because social media is literally gamified to show you views and engagement metrics and all these things to try to game it, right? So you get more and more and more. And there isn't enough analytics in LinkedIn, for example, or even sometimes across the MarTech landscape to see who are those people who are actually engaging. Are those the people on our target account list? Are these people that we can actually sell to versus kind of chasing popularity for popularity's sake? And so if you're on social media, for example, even sometimes YouTube and some other platforms, it's easy to say, oh, this video got 1 million views. It must have been successful. And it was successful in getting attention. But was that the real intent of that video, right? Or that post or that article? So if the intent is to, get people to maybe choose you out of 3 different vendors, or maybe it was just to bring awareness to a category or awareness to a new product or demand for a new feature and product, right? Views are not necessarily the best end game for that. It is an early indicator, right? We want to see how many people resonated with it. But I know many people who are getting 2,000, 3,000 views on a videos or on a post and getting a lot of leads versus people who are getting 50,000 views and getting 0.
Completely agreeing with you. And that also brings me to my next question. So when you see a LinkedIn post with, say, 50,000 likes versus one with like 50 but meaningful comments, which one would you bet your marketing budget on and why?
That's a great question. I would take the 50 comments, assuming those are, again, the right people and that, that inner circle that we're trying to sell to. And the reason being is it shows me 2 different things. One, 50,000 likes could be a picture of a super cute puppy, and you might get 50,000 likes. That's not going to help your business grow, right? Or it can be some platitude of like, hang in there, you can do it, right? And like a story, it's like, cool, that makes you feel good. That's really, has a lot of emotion. You're going to get a lot of virality out of that. It's hard to build a reputation that way. And what I believe in is building trust at scale and building a reputation where people know, like, and trust us. And so sharing pictures of puppies or anything that might get, kind of surface level emotional stuff that's going to get you 50,000 or whatever you said, 50,000, was it, likes, that's probably not going to help too much. But if you get 50 meaningful comments from CFOs and that's who you sell to, that not only has 50 meaningful interactions with those 50 folks, but you're also going to, LinkedIn is going to share that content with more CFOs and more people in finance, for example, right? Because those 50 people engage with it. So you're actually going to get more impressions that matter and more, I would say, more kind of credibility because other CFOs and people in senior finance positions are seeing someone's content, seeing all these people engage with it. And that's going to make you seem more credible than necessarily a post that went viral for the aforementioned reasons.
I kind of like that approach, and I see that you are pretty active on LinkedIn. So my next question for you is, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see companies making when they chase trends that don't align basically with their brand or with their brand image? And what's the long-term damage of this? And if you have any like real life examples that you want to share?
That's a good question. I don't see a ton of it. What I think ends up happening more is people don't really have a core like LinkedIn strategy. Companies don't have a LinkedIn strategy. And so instead of kind of making waves, which is making their own content or, kind of taking their point of view and amplifying it in different methods, what they kind of do is look for too many different trends and try to kind of ride that wave, right? So one week they're kind of their feed looks one way, the next it's another way, and it kind of like sometimes it's memes, sometimes it's graphics, but it always just feels like they're kind of trying to kind of catch a trend and stay relevant. And what I think what it does is you end up not really having any you're not very recognizable, right? So you're not known for one thing. Like I'm wearing an Adidas track jacket today. I'm wearing it because I like Adidas track jackets. I don't think they're very in style right now per se, but if I wear an Adidas track jacket in videos, which I have done actually a few years back, then my brand kind of gets associated with that. But if I'm wearing a whatever, designer thing today because that's what went viral, or, something that every week I'm just changing outfits, changing attire to try to look relevant, then your brand becomes trying to look relevant, right? And trying to be trendy instead of being kind of known for one thing. So I don't know if that example will make it to the final cut there, but I think it's better to kind of pick one or two formats, one or two styles, really hone those in and get engagement and be known for that, and then test other things versus the inverse, which is kind of always testing and not really having one core approach.
That answer will definitely make it to the article.
Okay.
Jumping on to my next question, what does evergreen B2B content look like for you, especially on like a fast-paced platform like LinkedIn today? And how do you create content that delivers consistent results, maybe months or even years later? Is there like a strategy?
Yeah, there's a time and a place to be hyper relevant to what's going on today, right? So, for example, if I don't know, there's a big acquisition, in your industry, commenting on that, right? So, commenting on current events, current trends, that's going to not be very evergreen, right? Because that's something that's happening right now in a specific moment. The opposite would be evergreen content, which is something that's probably still relevant 3, 6, 12 months later, maybe even more. And so, when I'm creating LinkedIn content, I'm trying to balance both of those things. So I actually lean towards some of the more currently relevant stuff if possible, because it's not always on, right? So there's not always something to comment on. But when there is a moment and it has that people's attention and it's highly relevant, I want to jump on that. Now, alternatively, when there isn't something like that to comment on, then I'm looking at some of the problems and some of the how-tos and stories that I know that are going to be relevant to my audience 2 years ago, today, and 2 years from now, right? Because there are some of these, constants, if you will. So I think just kind of breaking it down and saying, hey, look, is this a post that is going to be relevant in 6 months? Or is this something that's only going to be relevant for maybe 6 days? And that's kind of a good way you can look through the lens of what should we be focusing on. I think if anything, it's safer to over-index on evergreen. But again, it's still helpful to have some of that more trending content from time to time. So you're also building a reputation for being in the know and kind of having a pulse on what's going on with your audience and what they care about.
Yeah, so I think basically a perfect like balance of both are important for your LinkedIn growth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, ROI is like a big and a dreaded term, especially for marketing leaders. So they are under pressure to show their ROI quickly. How do you prove the value of a sustainable content strategy to executives who want immediate results?
Yeah, that's the big question, and that's a tough one. And so I think the first thing is understand what ROI means to the individual you're talking to. A lot of time, value or impact or ROI, they can kind of it has a different meaning depending on who you're talking to, both at the company. So your CFO and your CMO will probably have somewhat different perspective on what ROI is or what impact is. Your sales leader will also probably have a different perspective. Also, CMOs across different companies are going to have different perspectives. So I think the first thing to do is to uncover what exactly ROI means in the context of who you're talking to at your organization. The second thing is to show early and lagging indicators, because most of the time, especially at the executive level, ROI is going to mean company growth, specifically revenue, but not always. And so I think it's like, look, if you have different programs that you're running, let's first understand what is the number one goal, which is what is the strategic initiative at the company and executive level that this program is going to help support. And sometimes it is a demand gen, campaign, and we are looking at, inbound demos, and we're going to track those demos to close one. And that's usually pretty straightforward. But a lot of times for brand building activities, social media channels, you're not going to see that initially. And sometimes it's really hard, if at all, to see it linearly. So what I like to do is show just different early and lagging indicators, which is like, look, for before we can even get any inbound demos and get people, hitting contact sales on our website, we're going to have to get, for example, on LinkedIn, some early indicators like views, engagement, and maybe like follower growth, for example. Once we start to see that, that's our early indicator. And then we'll start to track down a funnel, if you will, how it's impacting. Because every time you kind of go from, social media to website traffic to inbound demos, you're obviously going to see a big drop off in your conversion, traffic and conversion. So it's just starting to understand, what does that look like? And then I think over time, if you're running a program every week or month, whatever makes sense for that cadence, is show how those early indicators are growing, and if and when it's starting to resonate, kind of cascade down to some of those more pipeline and company growth metrics. And I think the other one too is, don't be afraid to use qualitative feedback. So sometimes screenshots of people in your ICP who are engaging with your content, or email replies, or comments in a webinar. Those things are also really powerful signals, because a lot of times people will consume but not necessarily engage or reply. And so I think when you do get those signals, those are really important to kind of pair with the hard metrics and show people, hey, we're not just here to get laser focused on inbound demos or pipeline gen, but we want to measure the resonance across our marketing and really start to pick up how much momentum are we building, because that's also going to help you not only make the case of why you're doing this, but why you should continue and scale, and help you inform new programs, because you're starting to understand really what's working and what's not.
That's, I think, that is a great advice. Now, talking about the reader. So you've built the reader from content into this community now. What was the turning point where you realized you needed to shift from broadcasting to building with your audience?
Yeah, I think, it's always a little odd to think, do people care what's going on kind of behind the scenes, right? So that could be, what am I building, and how, people might see what you build when you launch something. What I learned is people want to see the content behind the content. So what was the process of getting there? What did it look like to get approval? What was your thought process for spending $100,000 on a program? Or, hey, you went to an event. What was that really like behind the scenes in a day in the life? And I actually had to have a lot of people tell me, hey, we want this kind of content from you, because it always feels a little maybe uncomfortable posting some of that stuff and sharing, being a little more vulnerable and sharing a little bit more, because it feels like, who cares? Who's really going to want to know, the type of sneakers I pick and why when going to an event? But people do. And I think too is people want diversity in their content. They don't want to just be broadcasted to, because they have an eye for that, right? Broadcasted content is almost always very polished. It looks like it's been manufactured and ready for kind of the consumer, and people are picking up on that, and it kind of smells like sales or smells like marketing. And so sometimes when people see the more low polished, behind the scenes, less scripted content, they actually gravitate towards that, because it feels more real, it feels more honest, and it feels like you're kind of letting them in to your life. And people like that. People like to have what's been termed media friends, right? They may not know you personally, but they feel like they know you through your content. And so you can build a much deeper relationship with folks by kind of building with them and sharing behind the scenes, than just kind of polishing everything and making everything very market friendly and feeling like that's the only way that you can build trust and earn attention.
That's great. And I think we are on time. That brings us towards our last question. For a B2B marketer who's been focused on traditional metrics, demand gen tactics, what's the first step they should take forward towards building their content to community pipeline?
Yeah, it's a good one. So I think the first thing you have to think of is, how do you invite your audience to be part of your journey? So first, you have to know what your mission is. Your mission cannot be, if you're a SaaS company or a services company, to grow your profit and grow your revenue and your profit. To grow your profit and your revenue, people aren't going to really care about that too much. What they care about is themselves. And so you need to have some sort of mission, right? So what is the mission of your company, who you're trying to help and why, and your content should be a reflection of that. So next is, you want to invite them to build it with you and to be part of it. I've seen folks say, hey, let's start to take going back to the CFO example. I have one of my clients is a CFO with a newsletter, and she's changed it from broadcasting her thoughts to broadcasting, but also inviting other CFOs to share their insights and their ideas. And so now you're starting to show folks, hey, I'm plugged into the community. I'm inviting people on stage, air quotes, and now you're building relationships with the individuals, of course, that are taking part in that. The other things you can do is simple things like, hey, if you're publishing a book, share the 4 book covers. Which one do you know, and ask your audience, which ones do you like more? Hey, we're thinking of, we're in the middle of planning our next event. We're thinking between Atlanta and Denver. Which one should we pick? So just inviting folks along the journey. And I've done this with my rebrand. Which logo do you like the best? Even though I had already picked which one I was going to use. So it's just, kind of, then that's just one way you can do it. But the more that you get folks involved, maybe submitting their own content, taking questions and putting that into next content, even if you're broadcasting and not, having them write it, there's a million ways that you can really start to, I guess, go to market together in a way, or go to content together. And so, yeah, I think it's just inviting your audience to be part of this journey with you, listening to their voice, and then putting their input into practice, however that kind of takes shape.
Yeah, I think that was great, and we got some good insights from today's article. Thank you so much for doing this.